We've got a lot to talk about with this weather briefing.
Weather. We have weather, so he's got a good turnout.
Okay, so thanks for coming today. Obviously, this is a lot more of an audience in the past couple of weeks, probably because we have stuff going on throughout the United States, especially here in Pennsylvania. So here's Paul. He also this is Paul, the grad student here at Penn State. He also was the former Vice President of the Campus Weather Service, so it's great to have him come down and do this.
Well, it's definitely great to be here, especially when there's a lot to talk about. And, you know, with this storm system that's currently rolling on through, there really is, you know, a lot of parts to this storm system. So not only do we have, you know, the winter weather aspect in the northeast, but we also have, you know, the severe weather aspect as well in the southeast. So this is the SPC homepage right now. So there are a couple tornado watches that are out, and there have been some tornado warnings that have been issued. And one of the things that I saw recently, actually, was this video that was posted on Twitter. And, you know, I wanted to show this video because this shows just how quickly things can change once inclement weather swings through. So things are starting off pretty calm right now, but then rain starts to fall, you know, furniture then starts to get moved, and then, you know, the rest is, you know, pretty dramatic with how quickly things change. This is from Brad Panovich's Twitter account. And so what's really kind of striking with this video is actually right after the tree falls, there's actually another gust of wind that happens later on. And with that gust of wind, there's actually a wind shift. So it's like coming in a totally different direction compared to where the winds were initially. So while the Weather Service will be sending out a storm report survey to really truly decide what actually ended up happening with some of these storms, you know, videos like this where you have a very strong wind shift could certainly lead you down the path of this actually being a tornado. So certainly there are a lot of severe weather warnings right now in the southeast, you know, enhanced risk as well. So definitely a lot going on down there. But there's also a lot of weather going on closer to home as well. And so this is the current radar. So there is some light to moderate rain falling outside right now. So the reflectivity values are only, you know, right around 20 decibels right now. And one thing I also wanted to show is the correlation coefficient values. And this is a really great tool to look at because you can actually see a lot with correlation coefficient. So essentially your radar beam, you know, at an angle, once it's going farther and farther away from the radar, it's also increasing in height. And once it reaches a certain height where the melting layer is taking place, you get this ring right here, and that's exactly where the melting layer is. So correlation coefficient can really be useful when kind of estimating where the height of the melting layer is. And so can differential reflectivity. So differential reflectivity basically shows the ratio of the horizontal dimension of a particle to the vertical dimension. That's the log-pace ratio. So essentially when there's snow crystals that are melting, liquid water starts to form on either side, and that increases the horizontal dimension, that increases the amount of radiation scattered in the horizontal direction, that increases your differential reflectivity. So take a mental screenshot of this ring with the correlation coefficient value, and we'll look at differential reflectivity. And as expected, here is a higher ring right here of differential reflectivity because that is where the melting layer is taking place. Guidance is showing, of course, that there could be a transition to snow tomorrow morning, and we are going to talk about that. Right now, though, temperatures are right in the middle 30s. It did get below 32 for a little bit at the Walker Davis last night. We'll take a look at that. So right here, you can see there were some 31s here. I think the low was 30.7 right here. This was at 11:30. So there was a little bit of icing that did take place. This morning, though, on the way over here, the top of my car had a little bit of a glaze of ice on it, but nothing too much. So certainly there wasn't a whole lot when it came to precipitation last night. I believe the official OB this morning had 0.03 of an inch. So certainly, you know, the predictions for 1/10 to 1/4 of an inch, at least in State College, we had a little less compared to those forecasts. So essentially right now temperatures are still stuck in the middle 30s, and I also wanted to show that not too far away there are significantly higher temperatures actually. So here's State College right here. To our southwest though, we actually have temperatures in the 50s. That's where these reds are right here. I'll move this a little farther down so you can see red is 48 to 52. So, you know, even though right here in State College we're still stuck, you know, in the 30s, not too far away temperatures are significantly above normal. And quite often what does end up happening is this ridge off to our west, you know, acts as a barrier basically for that warmer air to move on through. And essentially you get this situation where this warm surge right here is really kind of stuck in the southwest and doesn't really move too much farther east. And that looks to be the case for this scenario as well. And of course, with the colder air in place and the colder air moving on in, we have lower temperatures up in the northwestern part of the state into New York as well. Those are going to be moving to the south and to the east. And we can also then take a look at what's going to happen over the next day or so when it comes to this storm system. So this storm system, there's a lot going on with it, as we've already discussed. There's also, you know, that severe weather outbreak in the south. And this is actually the new 18Z NAM that's rolling out right now, actually. So these frames just came out about 20 minutes ago or so. And so essentially, we'll zoom in onto the northeast here so we can get a better look. The general idea is that rain will redevelop over State College as that storm system organizes and moves to the northeast. It's a very impressive trough. It's definitely a very impressive storm system as a whole. There's definitely a very large snow shield with this system. And as we move forward in time here, this is 7 a.m. tomorrow morning, and look at how close State College is right here. So the NAM 3K says it's very close. Here's 8 a.m. though. We do see a changeover in the 3K, but there is some disagreement as to how quickly the cold air moves in, how much State College will change over to snow. This is the latest HER, the 18Z HER, or this is the 19Z HER right here, but the 18Z HER goes out far enough to where the HER actually does show a changeover as well. In terms of snowfall amounts, if State College were to change over tomorrow morning, probably only expecting light snowfall totals. Essentially, just a few hour window where you could see some snow mixing in. But the thing is also, is that if we do see a flip to snow, it could be moderate to heavy because there's a lot going on dynamically with this storm system as well. So if we look at, say, where frontogenesis is taking place, there's quite a bit of frontogenesis at 850 millibars here. And so what some of the higher res guidance is saying is that with that frontogenesis, you could see quite a sharp band of precip right here. So this is the high res RGEM. And so right here, this is at 9 a.m. tomorrow morning. This is a very heavy band of snow. Again, not everything is showing this, but certainly some of the high res guidance is showing the potential for you know, these heavier snowfall rates if we do see that cold air move on in. So one thing I also wanted to point out as well is, so the HER temperatures, if we look at the trend with the HER temperatures over the last, say, several runs or so, here's the analysis right now. This is analysis at 19Z Thursday. This is 2 o'clock in the afternoon, an hour ago. And take a look at State College. We're at about the mid to upper 30s. And with that, you know, obviously that matches pretty close to what, you know, we saw with the current surface temperatures. However, if we go back in time, notice that the HER, this is the 13Z HER 6 hours out, had temperatures off by about 15 degrees. So the HER, for whatever reason, I've noticed this over the last several times we've had kind of cold air sticking around in State College with a high pressure system to the northeast. The HER tends to erode that low level cold too quickly. And so if we go forward in time, you know, obviously that's a pretty significant temperature departure for a 6 hour forecast. You're talking about a 10 to 15 degree temperature swing in 6 hours. And the HER, as a result, if there is any kind of low level cold that does stick around, you know, the HER might have some additional difficulty being able to really predict, you know, where freezing rain, you know, accretion could take place. So the HER, though, is showing that changeover even with that surface temperature bias. And again, the 18Z HER did show that transition taking place at about at about 8 to 9 a.m. Tomorrow. And the general theme though is that this would last for about a few hours before the storm system moves on through, essentially. So that's definitely a big uncertainty for tomorrow. I would say one thing that's less uncertain though is we will likely be seeing snow squall and snow shower chances increase throughout the afternoon and evening tomorrow, because with this low level cold moving on in, you have the lapse rates, the temperature decreases with height sharpen tremendously. And so as a result, instability snow showers are probably likely tomorrow, I would have to imagine. This is still this is 1 p.m. in the afternoon tomorrow, and the low pressure is moving out. You have pretty strong winds. One interesting fact as well is that the Lake Erie actually has a considerable less amount of ice right now compared to what it typically has. So that could add additional moisture for any kind of snow shower or snow squall activity that does end up happening tomorrow. So I think that's probably more likely than not that you do see widespread snow shower and snow squall activity tomorrow. When it comes to this storm system though, when it comes to the synoptic snow shield, there's a lot more that is uncertain. And so I just wanted to look at a couple of soundings here. And so this is the HRRR on pivotal weather. And I wanted to look at the vertical velocities. So essentially right here is the dendritic growth zone right over here. I'll pull this up on tidbits since you can see the vertical velocities better on the side. So I'll pull this over to, this is at 9 a.m. So we'll pull up a sounding close to State College. And right here, so this right here marks where the dendritic growth zone is taking place. And essentially the way you read this is omega, negative omega actually means you have rising motion taking place, because these omega coordinates are in pressure coordinates. So essentially it's saying, okay, how is pressure changing basically? And if your pressure is negative, that has to mean you're going up essentially. So anywhere you see negative omega, that means you have rising motion. If you have positive omega, you have sinking motion. If you're in W coordinates, then positive W would mean you're increasing height. But essentially, here's the dendritic growth zone. You have a lot of upward motion taking place in here. So even with the HRRR, again, we discussed was too warm at the surface. So if this is too warm, then certainly this could be a scenario where you have a couple hours worth of moderate to heavy snow. But again, this dendritic growth zone right here is pretty impressive to see such strong vertical velocities taking place, right within that zone. So very likely there's very good snow growth taking place as well. So moving forward here, you have, this is at 10 a.m. So what we were looking at before was at 9 a.m. And right here, 39, that's too warm most likely. But again, you still have strong vertical velocities taking place with the dendritic growth zone as well. So kind of looking at what is going on with the vertical profile can also add some value as well. So I wanted to quickly take a look at this as well. Here's your satellite. So you can see here's a cold front right here, and it's going to be a pretty classic looking storm, I think, on the satellite tomorrow. It's still developing, but eventually once it makes it over to the New England area, it could very well be a significant storm system. But I also wanted to show this as well. This is pretty interesting. I was mentioning this to a few people earlier, but take a look at this. So this is the NAM 3K. So if we look at the surface low right here, right around the area of frontogenesis, we start to see this interesting looking pressure pattern right here. And that appears to be some kind of numerical instability that's taking place. And as a result, the NAM 3K is starting to show all kinds of very odd looking, isobar patterns here. It actually shows a 919 low off the coast here. So it's interesting to see that with a dynamical storm system like this, you could see, there's a lot going on basically. And for some of the models, there are certain thresholds that, aren't met. And so therefore the flow isn't balanced. And as a result, you get these pressure patterns. This happened as well back in, this is a couple of years back for Typhoon Manghut, where the H-wharf had a numerical instability, and that actually deepened the low sub 800. So it's important as well to look at model guidance and, to see, okay, we have this kind of pressure field with the NAM 3K, how reasonable is that? And something like this is definitely not reasonable. But it's interesting to look at and, point out stuff like this when this does happen, and it goes to show the overall, just a lot of things going on with this situation. So I wanted to talk about quickly a little bit about the medium and long range as well, and then we can open up for discussion. So essentially, looking forward beyond this storm system, we look at the pressure anomaly here. So again, very impressive storm system. And so the storm system moves off to the north. There is a reinforcing shot of colder air. So essentially we're getting closer. The GFS has below normal 850 temperatures. So probably a seasonable or below seasonable day for the weekend essentially. But notice, this pattern that we've been in has been this persistent southeasterly ridge and, the trough in the west. And that's been a pretty unfavorable pattern for most of the mid-Atlantic into the northeast. And if we look at the 500 millibar height anomalies, here's that southeasterly ridge again. And it really, you have that closed 588 contour right here. And it does, there are some shots of colder air that do move in. Essentially though, that southeast ridge is probably there to stay. Just making any kind of medium or long range forecast, just asking, is there anything that could change the pattern? Is there a physical mechanism that could change the pattern from where we are right now? And looking at the ensembles going forward as well. So we have this, again, this shot of cooler air here. There's a trough in the east. And something that's pretty consistent, though, is that southeasterly ridge. So we've seen this ridge this entire winter. And for all intents and purposes, it looks like this southeast ridge looks to continue. And, most likely offering maybe the potential for maybe snow to ice events. If storm systems track far enough west, could be mostly rain as well. The Euro ensemble here agrees for the most part. So there's that southeasterly ridge, closed off 588 decameter height there at 500 millibars. And that's in a persistent feature that looks to continue. And one of the other features as well for long-range forecasting is the Madden-Julian oscillation. And it's interesting to kind of look at some of the differences with some of the MJO kind of propagation here. So here's the GFS. So this is basically, now should note as well, these RMM plots that kind of show where the MJO convection is taking place are not perfect. So there is some caution that should be used with these maps. Here's the GFS ensemble though, showing a very strong MJO pulse into phases 6 and 7. And that does favor, higher temperatures across the east, warmer air mass, that southeast ridge still staying in place. The Euro is more muted with this MJO though, and it shows less of a pulse into phases 6 and 7. But essentially you are looking at, so even if you have the MJO forcing that the GFS is showing, you're going to get a southeast ridge. If you have no forcing, you don't change the pattern, you continue to get a southeast ridge. So kind of just summarizing things up here, we have this storm system moving on through. It's offering all kinds of weather right now. Severe weather in the southeast, winter weather in the northeast, chance for snow squalls tomorrow, looking at a colder weekend. And as we go forward here in the medium range, with that southeast ridge though, you are increasing that temperature difference, that area of baroclinicity basically. And so I think it's very likely, and the CPC in there, I think it was their 8 to 14 day outlook, was actually pretty, when it came to the precipitation chances across the board. Let's see if I can get the precip chances here. Because the precip, yeah, right here. So the CPC is really saying that this is a pretty active pattern. because you've increased the temperature difference with that area of baroclinicity due to that southeast ridge, and you're going to have a very active pattern. And with that active pattern, you get lots of storm chances, you get above normal precipitation. So looking forward here though, besides this storm system, the GFS is showing a weak front for Monday. No major chances, it looks like, over the next week or so beyond this storm system. It looks like as though you could be seeing some waves of precipitation. When it comes to a very organized low, it does look like as though any kind of significant storm system remains on the horizon. Certainly not in the immediate future, at least not in the next week or so. And that is reflected though by the fact that not too much is going on. So we definitely have to watch for an active pattern. But when it comes to any kind of significant organized storm system, there's not really any kind of signal over the next week or so. But certainly when it comes to any kind of precipitation, most likely above normal in the 8 to 14 in the extended range. With that, I'll be happy to take anyone's questions or comments about the upcoming pattern. MJ.
Do you think it's possible to derive any other info from low-level vorticity or stuff along those lines?
So Ethan and I were actually looking at this before, and we saw that some of the subtle changes associated with the 500 millibar trough. It's pretty important actually when it comes to the eventual placement. So I was kind of thinking that there's two main factors that I can think of off the top of my head when it comes to where the surface low is going to form. So depending on how much digging there is, depending on how much the trough, the vorticity goes to the south, could be where the surface cyclogenesis initiates farther to the south. However, you also have to consider how much the flow field is south to north off the east coast. So even if your low might start farther south with more digging, if your south to north flow field is more meridional, then you could be seeing a farther west track. But it's interesting because even though the latest NAM was more amplified, the actual placement of these heavy snow band actually shifted to the east. And so it actually shifted to the east over Harrisburg here, whereas the previous run had it closer to State College. And it's overall slower because it's more amplified as well. If it was more progressive, the flow would be traveling farther north and east compared to the previous run. Sean.
Based on what you said, it sounds like we're going to be back to above average temperatures next week. Would you agree with that?
I would say as a whole, it's probably more likely than not that the overall, pattern of above normal temperatures in the east looks to hold. That's not to say you can't get, periodic cold shots. But I think overall you're looking at a situation where, the mean temperature distribution shows above normal temperatures in the east for at least the next 10 days or so.
Could you show the ensemble GEFS upper air 250 millibars? Does it have that product?
Yes. So this is really cool as well because you actually have dual jet streaks here.
Yeah.
So you have
the surface low is going to go. Surface low is going to bomb out wherever the right entrance overlaps the left exit region of those two jets.
And this is a great product to look at as well because your left exit right here and the right entrance overlap each other. And this is a great example of how dual jet streaks can really accentuate surface low development and get you, a really strong storm system.
And then, as long as you're on the GEFS, bring up the ensemble sea level pressure. It's at the bottom there.
Oh, like the ensemble members?
Yeah.
Okay.
It'll show. It's very consistent. It's just going to follow the overlapping right entrance and left exit regions.
Yeah, there's certainly a lot of confidence with the GEFS.
Yeah, I mean that's ridiculously overconfident. And then I hesitate to ask this because you already proved that the NAM 3K sucks. But could you play the same game with the temperatures in the Northeast with the trend? You showed that the HER temperatures are too low. I believe that's what you showed, right?
The observations have currently been verifying a lower
Right.
compared to what the HER is
So
saying.
could you see if the NAM trend is the same way? In other words, go to the 3K NAM, under mesoscale 3K NAM, and then just do the trend. I realize it's at 6-hour intervals and not, but is,
Okay, yeah, definitely. Let's see if, like, let's look
see,
at
the 3K NAM should be better than the HER, actually. Or is it still much too warm?
This is, so I just did a trend comparison here. So we're looking at now a run that was 6Z yesterday. So this was 6 runs ago. And as a whole, the temperature distribution looks to be reasonable on the 3K, and it seems to match what observations show as well.
So the 3K NAM is doing a better job keeping the colder air in.
I think based off of what we've seen with the trends with the 3K compared to the HER, I think that's a pretty good conclusion to make. That's a really great point about the upper level jet streaks, and you know, certainly, you know, how the trough, you know, digs and how exactly it's oriented could determine where that upper level divergence is taking place and resultant lower level convergence and surface cyclogenesis.
By the
Okay.
way, I think, I could be wrong here, but I think that Lake Erie literally has 0 ice cover right now.
I think I saw that.
You mentioned that it's pretty low. I don't think it can go negative.
It's as low as it can get, which is really impressive, you know, because I think on average it's about 40% ice coverage. So the fact that it's just non-existent, I mean, that has huge implications when it comes to any kind of snow shower or snow squall potential, you know, with any kind of cold air mass that moves on in.
Okay, well, thanks, Paul.
Thanks, Paul.
All right, thanks
everyone
guys.
for coming.